I got off a 10-hour travel day thinking I was coming home for Christmas, and before I could even drag my suitcase over the front step, my family tried to dump 4 kids on me and leave for a ski vacation I had accidentally paid for. That was the moment I stopped being useful and started paying attention. My mother, Diane, opened the door before I could knock. She didn't hug me. She didn't say she was glad I made it. She just looked me up and down like I was late for a shift and said, "You'll babysit Megan's kids. We're heading out in a few hours, so don't unpack in the front hall." Then she turned and walked away like that settled it. I stood there with my hand still wrapped around my suitcase handle, jet-lagged, dry-eyed, and not even fully inside the house yet. Megan appeared in the hallway with 1 kid on her hip and 3 more bouncing around her knees in little winter coats. She looked excited, flushed, loud, already halfway into vacation mode. "Say hi to Aunt Claire," she said, grinning like this was adorable. "She's your Christmas present." The kids crashed into me all at once, sticky hands, boots against my shins, one of them trying to wipe his nose on my sleeve while Diane laughed from the kitchen like this was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. I didn't hug anybody back. I didn't even take my coat off. I just felt that familiar shift in my chest, the one that always happened right before I got cornered into paying for something, fixing something, or stepping in so everyone else could pretend they weren't drowning. The difference was, this time I wasn't surprised. 2 weeks earlier, Diane had accidentally texted me the rental confirmation for their mountain lodge instead of sending it to Megan. Same place, same dates as the week they'd begged me to come home for family Christmas. That was when I realized I hadn't been invited home. I'd been scheduled. So I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, just enough to make Diane stop moving in the kitchen and look at me over her shoulder. "You really should have checked your email before saying that," I said. Megan rolled her eyes immediately. "Claire, don't start. We have a flight in 3 hours." One of the boys was chanting about snow. The oldest girl kept asking if there was going to be hot chocolate at the lodge. Their voices bounced around the entryway while my mother narrowed her eyes and asked, "What did you do?" "What I should have done a long time ago," I said. I set my suitcase upright beside the wall and looked directly at Megan. "I'm not staying here to babysit, and before you start loading those kids into the car, you should open the reservation app." For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Megan laughed that short, sharp laugh she used whenever she thought I was bluffing. She shoved a diaper bag into my arms and said, "You're unbelievable. Hold this and stop being dramatic." I handed it right back to her. "I cancelled the lodge 3 days ago." That changed the air instantly. Megan's face lost colour first, then Diane's. Megan grabbed her phone so fast she almost dropped the toddler. I watched her thumb stab at the screen, then stop. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Diane took 2 quick steps towards me, voice already shaking. "Tell me you're joking." I shook my head. No, the reservation was under the card with my name on it, so I cancelled it and took the refund. The oldest boy looked up at me confused. "Are we still going skiing?" That was the worst part of it. Not Diane's expression, not Megan's panic. It was those kids standing there in puffy jackets, getting their first lesson in how adults make promises with other people's money. I crouched a little so my voice would land softer with them. "Not today," I said. "You need to ask your mum what the plan is." Megan snapped before I could even stand back up. "You checked my reservation?" I looked at her. "No, I checked the account I've been paying off for you." That landed harder than the cancellation, because now we weren't talking about one trip. Now we were talking about the whole machine they built around me. The house refinance I co-signed because Diane swore it was temporary. The utilities in my name. the van payment, grocery runs from Manhattan at midnight because Megan said the kids had nothing left in the fridge. Every small favor that somehow became a permanent bill. Diane folded her arms, like she could still pull this back under control. "We've all helped each other in this family," she said. I almost laughed. "That's not what this is. I flew across the country because you said you wanted Christmas together. You left out the part where I was staying home with 4 kids while you and Megan went on vacation." Megan's jaw tightened. "It's 1 week. You work from home half the time anyway." I looked at her for a long second. "I'm a litigation associate, Megan. I don't have a magical life where I can drop everything because you decided I'm flexible." The doorbell rang before either of them could answer. It was calm, precise, almost polite. Diane frowned and looked toward the front door. "Who is that?" she asked. I picked up my suitcase again and stepped slightly to the side. "You weren't expecting anyone," I said. "I was." Diane opened the door with that brittle little smile she saves for strangers, and standing there was a woman in her early 40s wearing jeans, a dark blazer, and a state badge on a lanyard. She held a clipboard under one arm and looked like the kind of person who had spent years walking into tense houses and pretending not to notice the smell of panic. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm Lauren Hayes with Child Protective Services. We spoke on the phone about a follow-up visit." For the first time since I'd arrived, my mother actually looked unsteady. She took a small step back and glanced at me, then at Megan, then back at Lauren. "There has to be some mistake," she said. "Nobody here called." I stepped forward just enough to enter Lauren's line of sight. "I did," I said. "I'm Claire. Their aunt. I flew in from New York." Lauren's eyes moved from my suitcase to the kids in coats to the rolling luggage by the door. She took in the half-zipped jackets, the snack wrappers on the floor, the open tote bags, the wine glass still sitting on the entry table from the night before. She didn't react much, but I could tell she was already building a picture. Megan stared at me like I'd set the house on fire. "Claire, what did you do?" she said, low and sharp. I didn't answer her right away because the truth was, this hadn't started today. It had started 3 weeks earlier on a FaceTime call I almost didn't pick up. I was still at my office, sitting in a glass conference room with contract drafts spread all over the table, when Megan called asking for a quick favour. I answered, and the camera angle gave me their backyard first. 2 of the kids were outside in t-shirts, even though I could see frost on the grass. 1 was barefoot. The toddler was wandering too close to the pool gate. The same one I'd been hearing for over a year was getting fixed next weekend. On the porch, Megan sat with a blanket over her legs, drinking wine and scrolling her phone, while one of the boys stood at the sliding door crying because his hands hurt from the cold. I remember saying, as calmly as I could, "Can somebody bring them in?" Megan had barely looked up. She just said, "They're fine, Claire. Stop doing that thing where you act like I'm killing them." Then, in the same breath, she asked me for $200 for matching Christmas outfits. I ended the call, stared at my own reflection in the black screen, and for the first time I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Not that Megan was evil. Not that the kids were in immediate danger every second of the day. Just that this house ran on neglect, excuses, and my money, and those children were always the first ones expected to absorb the consequences. So I called the hotline. I gave dates. I gave screenshots. I sent texts where Megan joked about having built-in babysitters and complained that the kids were always underfoot when she wanted a break. I told them about the pool gate, the drinking, the lack of supervision, and the way every inconvenience somehow turned into a request for money while the basics kept slipping. They told me they would likely start with a home visit unless they saw something more serious. They asked when everyone would definitely be there. I said Christmas. Now Lauren stood in the doorway with professional patience, while my family tried to pretend this was all absurd. Diane recovered first. She squared her shoulders and said, "We take very good care of these children. We're literally taking them on a winter trip." Lauren's expression cooled by 1/2 degree. "That's fine, Mom," she said. "I'm here to assess the home environment and supervision. It won't take long." Megan made a disgusted sound in the back of her throat. "This is insane." Lauren stepped inside without waiting for permission twice. The kids went quiet in that strange way children do when they know the room is changed but don't know why. She took in the sink stacked with dishes, the half-empty bottles on the counter, the portable heater too close to a pile of laundry, the diaper bag open on a chair with medicine gummies loose in the side pocket. None of that looked dramatic. That was the point. Real neglect almost never looks cinematic. It looks normal enough that everybody keeps explaining it away. "Where do the children sleep?" Lauren asked. Diane immediately jumped in with, "The house is a little messy because we were about to leave." Megan added, "Claire is always here helping, so today just got chaotic." Lauren turned to me. "Do you live here?" "No," I said. "I live in Manhattan. I'm not a caregiver. I'm the one paying most of their bills." I kept my voice flat and clean, like I was stating facts in court. "I was invited for Christmas. Nobody told me I was expected to stay behind as childcare." Lauren nodded once and wrote something down. Then she asked to see the bedrooms and the backyard. The kids drifted after her in a little cluster, curious and confused, while Megan stood frozen in the middle of the living room with her phone still in her hand. The front door stayed open just long enough for a cold draft to move through the house, and I remember thinking that for once, I wasn't the only adult in that room who could force consequences to mean something. The second Lauren disappeared down the hallway, Megan spun on me so fast I thought she might actually throw her phone. "You called CPS on us 2 days before Christmas?" she whispered, like keeping her voice down would make it less vicious. "On your own family?" Diane didn't whisper. She paced behind the couch with both hands pressed to her temples, muttering about records and files and people getting the wrong idea. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't all felt so familiar. Same panic, same outrage, same assumption that the real crime was somebody finally noticing. I leaned against the wall near the front door and looked at Megan. "I called because your kids are not safe enough, and you keep acting like that's an insult instead of a problem." She gave this short, disbelieving laugh. "You think you know what parenting is because you send money and judge me from New York?" That one hit a nerve. Not because it was true, but because it was the lie they'd all been using for years. I was only allowed to help in ways that required sacrifice. The second I had an opinion, I was cold, controlling, dramatic, selfish. Useful and silent. That was the role. Diane stopped pacing long enough to turn on me fully. "Do you have any idea what happens if this goes on a file?" she demanded. "Do you want those children taken away?" I held her stare. "If things are safe and stable, then nobody is taking anyone. You should be relieved someone's finally looking, right?" She flinched at that, because she knew exactly what Lauren had already seen in the first 3 minutes. The sink full of dishes, the open alcohol, the bags packed before the children were actually ready. The whole atmosphere of adults rushing toward pleasure and expecting the kids to somehow absorb the gaps. Megan's face tightened. "You love acting like some martyr because you paid a few bills." That was when something in me went very still. Not angry, Not shaky, just done. I reached into my carry-on, pulled out the folder I'd packed before I ever left JFK, and set it on the coffee table between us. "A few bills," I said. "Go ahead, open it." She hesitated, then snatched the top sheet like she expected it to be some dramatic bluff. It wasn't. It was months of bank statements, wire transfers, screenshots, and account histories. Mortgage payments, power, water, internet, car note, insurance, grocery deliveries, school clothes, emergency cash apps sent at midnight with captions like, "Please don't make this a thing." Megan's eyes moved down the page and slowed. Then they started moving faster. She flipped to the next sheet, then the one after that. Diane came around the couch and looked over her shoulder, and I watched both of their faces change in real time. They knew I helped. They did not know what it looked like when every favor was lined up in a row with a $sign next to it. "This can't be right," Megan said finally, but her voice had gone thin. "It is," I said. 3 years. That's the clean version. I left out the small stuff. Numbers do something guilt never can. Guilt can be twisted, reframed, denied. Numbers just sit there, month after month, proof that I had been quietly funding a life I didn't even live in. I remembered last Thanksgiving, skipping a retreat with my firm, because Diane said she needed help hosting, only to spend 4 days cooking and watching kids while Megan went shopping. I remembered sending half my bonus to cover property taxes instead of putting it toward my own down payment. I remembered explaining away my own exhaustion like it was maturity, like being the dependable one was some kind of honor instead of a trap. "You make it sound so ugly," Diane said, and that sentence told me everything. Not that it was untrue, just that seeing it clearly offended her. "It is ugly," I said. "You've just never had to look at it straight." Megan threw one page back onto the table. "You didn't have to do all that." I smiled once, without warmth. That's the first honest thing anybody said since I got here. Because she was right. I didn't have to. I chose to, over and over, out of guilt, obligation, fear, habit, and the stupid hope that if I just helped enough, eventually I'd be treated like family instead of infrastructure. From upstairs, I heard one of the kids laugh at something Lauren said. It cut through the room in a way that almost hurt. Those kids were the only innocent people in that house, and even they had already learnt to read tension before they could spell it. Megan folded her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "You don't get it," she said. "You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like to be tired all the time and need help." There it was. Not just resentment, entitlement. The worldview underneath all of it. My time didn't count. My life didn't count. My money counted. My availability counted. But me as a person? Only when convenient. I let the silence sit there a second longer than comfortable. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't have kids. Which makes it even stranger that I've been paying for yours." Megan's mouth dropped open, and Diane snapped, "Don't be cruel." I looked at her. Cruel was flying me across the country under the pretense of Christmas so you could hand me 4 children and leave for a vacation on my card. That was when Megan, already cornered, reached for the ugliest thing she could find. "Maybe you're just bitter," she said. "Maybe you can't stand that I have a family and you don't." The room went very quiet after that. I felt it hit, because I'm human, and because she knew exactly where to aim. But what surprised me was how fast the pain burned off and left something cleaner behind. Relief. Because now it was out in the open. Now I didn't have to pretend anymore that any of this had ever been about temporary help or mutual support. It was about hierarchy. She had children, so her needs outranked my life. That was the belief. "Thank you," I said. Megan blinked. "For what?" I held her gaze. For finally saying the quiet part out loud. Megan's face changed when I said that. Not because she felt bad, but because she realized I had stopped trying to preserve her image of herself. That had always been my role in this family too, not just financier, but translator, cleaner, excuse maker. I was the one who softened everything. Megan isn't irresponsible. She's overwhelmed. Diane isn't manipulative. She's stressed. Dad isn't controlling. He's proud. I had spent years laundering their behavior into something easier to live with. The second I stopped doing that, the room felt colder. "You want honesty?" I asked. "Fine. Let's do honesty." I pulled one more paper from the folder and laid it on top of the stack. 3 weeks ago, I stopped the automatic mortgage payments. Diane stared at me like she hadn't heard correctly. "What?" she said. I kept my voice level. "I removed my account from the autopay. The lender sent a notice. I'm guessing nobody opened it." For a second, Megan just looked between us. Then Diane's hand flew to her chest. "You wouldn't do that," she said. But the panic in her voice told me she already knew I had. "I already did," I said. "And yesterday, before I got on the plane, I signed the paperwork to remove my name from the loan entirely. If you want to keep this house, you're going to have to qualify for it yourselves." Megan made this sharp, furious sound. "That's insane! You can't just blow up people's lives because you're mad." I looked at her. "I'm not blowing up your life. I'm stepping out of the blast radius of choices I didn't make." Diane's eyes were wet now, but not with sadness, with anger, with fear, with the shock of realizing there might actually be a wall where a door used to be. "The van," she said. "Claire, tell me you didn't touch the van." I didn't blink. I stopped covering the missed payments. If the account isn't current by the end of the month, they'll repossess it. Megan swore under her breath and grabbed the edge of the coffee table so hard her knuckles blanched. "The kids need that car." I nodded once. "Then you should probably pay for it." That was the thing none of them could stand. Not that I was hurting them. That I was refusing to keep hurting myself so they wouldn't feel the consequences of their own decisions. The whole structure only worked if I stayed guilty. The second I became factual, they had nothing to do but panic. Diane looked around the room like someone else might step in and fix this, which was almost funny considering that someone had always been me. "The utilities," she whispered. "The power and water." I met her eyes. "The autopay is gone. If you don't put those accounts in your own name and actually pay them, they'll shut off." For the first time all afternoon, nobody had a clever line ready. No one told me I was overreacting. No one said it was only 1 week, or family helps family, or I was making a big deal out of nothing. Because suddenly it wasn't theoretical anymore. It was lights, heat, a mortgage, a van, real things. Things they had gotten used to treating like background noise because I'd been carrying them so long they forgot they were heavy. Upstairs, footsteps creaked, and a second later Lauren came back down with the kids trailing behind her. The oldest girl was holding the toddler's hand. One of the boys had a sticker on his jacket, probably something Lauren gave him to keep him occupied. The kids looked calmer than any of the adults, which said a lot. Lauren stopped in the living room and looked at the three of them with the same measured expression she'd had from the start. "Thank you for your time," she said. "I completed the initial walkthrough. I'm leaving a written list of safety concerns that need to be addressed immediately." She handed Diane a stapled packet. "The pool gate needs a functioning latch, there are supervision issues, medication and small objects need to be secured, some sleeping arrangements need to be corrected. I'll be scheduling a follow-up after the holiday." Megan's voice cracked. "A follow-up?" Lauren nodded. "This visit goes on record as a warning. If the issues are corrected, that may be the end of it. If not, there are next steps." Diane looked horrified. "Next steps meaning what?" Lauren didn't soften. "Support services, mandatory classes. In more serious cases, temporary placement with relatives or foster care. We are not there right now. What matters is what happens next." The kids were quiet again. The oldest boy looked between the adults like he knew enough to understand that something important had just been said, even if he couldn't understand all the words. I hated that for him. I hated that all of this was happening around them. But I also knew that pretending things were fine had never protected them. It had only protected the adults who kept failing them. Megan turned and pointed at me with a shaking hand. "She planned this," she said to Lauren. "She timed it. She wants to ruin us." Lauren barely looked at me. "I'm not here to referee family conflict," she said. "I'm here because there are 4 children in this home, and they need sober, attentive, safe caregivers. That is the only issue I care about today." She picked up her bag and headed for the door. "Take the checklist seriously." After she left, the silence in the house felt different. Not chaotic. Exposed. Like every lie had just lost the protection of being private. Diane stood there clutching the papers. Megan was still gripping her phone. The kids had drifted toward the hallway, suddenly unsure if they were still going somewhere, or if the whole day had cracked open. I was just reaching for my folder when the front door opened again, and my father walked in with sunglasses on and car keys in his hand like he was already halfway to the airport. He stopped dead when he saw the room. "What happened?" he said. Megan answered before anyone else could. "We're not going anywhere. Claire cancelled everything and called CPS." Dad turned to me slowly. Even before he spoke, I could see it happen. That old look. The one that used to shut me up when I was 16 and tired and easier to scare. "Tell me that's not true," he said. I set the folder back in my bag and looked at him. "It's true." Dad took 2 slow steps toward me, still holding his keys, and the whole room shifted around him the way it always had. He was the kind of man who thought volume counted as authority and intimidation counted as logic. When I was younger, that worked. He'd crowd into my space, lower his voice, and make me feel like disagreement itself was disrespect. But I was 29 now, not 16, and I was too tired to be scared of him anymore. "We raised you," he said, jaw tight. "We kept a roof over your head, food in your mouth, clothes on your back. And this is how you repay us?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. That line had been waiting under everything for years. Every demand, every guilt trip, every emergency that somehow landed in my bank account. Nothing I gave was ever help. It was debt service on the crime of having been born into the family. "You kept a roof over my head until I was old enough to help keep one over yours," I said. "After that, you turned responsibility into a leash." Diane made this wounded sound in the back of her throat, like I'd said something cruel instead of accurate. Dad's face darkened. "Watch your mouth." I looked at him evenly. "No, you watch yours. You lied to get me here. You let Mum and Megan plan a whole trip around me staying behind with 4 kids, and all of it was being paid for with accounts tied to my name." Diane stepped in then, voice already sharpening into that familiar righteous edge. "You are the oldest," she said. "That means something. Your sister has 4 children. Your father's health isn't what it used to be. I'm carrying this whole household on my back. You don't get to opt out just because you've decided your little New York life matters more." There it was again. Not even hidden. My life was little, unless they needed something from it. My career mattered when Diane wanted to brag about me. My paycheck mattered when bills were due. But my time, my plans, my limits, those were all supposed to disappear the second family called. For a second, I just looked at the 3 of them. My mother clutching a CPS checklist like it was an unfair attack. My sister standing there with the same phone she used to ask me for grocery money and manicure money in the same hour. My father still trying to scare me back into compliance with posture alone. And all I could think was how normal this had felt for way too long. How many years I'd spent mistaking endurance for love. "I'm not opting out," I said. "I'm ending something that should never have been my job in the first place." Megan scoffed, but there was fear underneath it now. "You're not ending anything. You're throwing a tantrum because someone expected you to help." I shook my head. Helping is when someone asks. This is what you do instead. You decide. You assign. You assume. Then I reached into my coat pocket and felt the edge of the key fob there, solid and cold. "And since we're being honest, there's something else you should know. I'm not staying here." Dad frowned. "What are you talking about?" I held his gaze. "I bought a condo in Manhattan 6 weeks ago. Closed on it quietly. Furniture gets delivered Monday." For the first time all afternoon, none of them spoke. It was almost surreal. I had imagined telling them someday in a completely different setting, maybe over dinner, maybe once I was settled. But even in those better versions, I'd always pictured the same reaction first. Not pride, not congratulations, just calculation. How often can we visit? Is there a guest room? Can Jenna stay if things get bad? Even my milestones had never fully belonged to me. Megan found her voice first. "You bought a place and didn't tell us." I gave her a tired smile. I wanted one thing in my life that didn't immediately become a group resource. Dad's lip curled. "Then go. If you think you're better than us now, go live in your fancy apartment and see how long that attitude lasts." Diane didn't stop him. She didn't say I was still her daughter. She didn't tell him to calm down. She just stood there, silent. And that silence told me more than anything else had all day. That was the final piece. As long as I paid, I belonged. The second I stopped, I became expendable. So I picked up my suitcase and rolled it toward the front door. No one tried to help me. No one asked me to stay, not really. They wanted the money to stay. They wanted the labor to stay. Me as a person was already optional. At the threshold, I stopped and turned back. The 3 of them were standing in that living room like survivors of a storm that had come out of nowhere, when really they had been warned for years, and just kept assuming I would stand in the wind for them. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I am the oldest." My voice came out calm, almost gentle. "So let me finally set an example. From now on, I make decisions for me. Then I stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind me, and walked away without looking back. That night, when I unlocked my condo and stepped inside, the silence felt almost unreal. The place was still half empty, just fresh paint, stacked boxes, and a mattress on the floor. But it was mine, in a way nothing had ever been mine before. There were no unopened bills with my name attached to somebody else's bad decisions. No TV blasting cartoons. No one calling from the other room asking me to cover one more thing. I set my suitcase down in the bedroom, sat on the edge of that bare mattress, and just listened. For the first time in years, there was nobody in my immediate orbit waiting for me to rescue the day. The next morning, I made terrible coffee in a brand new machine and stood by the window watching the city wake up beneath me. Around 11, my phone lit up with Megan's name, and I almost let it ring out just to prove to myself I could. But I answered, and her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. She apologized first for the ambush, then for the babysitting assumption, then for the line about me not having kids, and that last one sounded like it had cost her something. She told me the trip was obviously dead. The kids had cried, Mum had locked herself in her room with a migraine, and Dad had spent the morning calling people who could supposedly undo what I did with the mortgage. Then her voice dropped even lower, and she said Lauren had already called about a faster follow-up because other agencies were now reviewing the household finances and benefits. I knew exactly why. I'd already sent in the documentation weeks earlier. Megan finally admitted what nobody in that house ever admitted until consequences showed up. They had leaned on me because I kept making it possible. She said she was looking for work, maybe at a daycare after New Year's, and for one dangerous second, I felt that old reflex rise up in me, the urge to say I'd help until her first paycheck hit. Instead, I told her the truth. You need to figure this out without me. I'm not calling anybody to soften this, and I'm not putting my name back on anything. A few minutes after we hung up, an unknown Arizona number left me a voicemail. It was my father, cold and furious, telling me I hadn't heard the last of this, and I wasn't going to walk away clean. I listened once, saved it, and then opened my laptop. I cancelled the last recurring transfers I'd forgotten about, including the grocery cash and the miscellaneous fund Megan somehow turned into fun money every month. Then I answered the email from the housing investigator, who had asked whether I had any final records to submit. I attached the rest of the statements, hit send, and closed the computer. That was the moment it really sank in for me. I wasn't in the middle of leaving anymore. I had left. By the end of January, my place looked like an actual home. I had a couch I picked because I liked it, a table with 2 chairs because I only needed 2, and a savings account that, for the first time in my adult life, stopped bleeding out to other people's emergencies. Back in Arizona, everything started catching up fast. My parents got notice that their benefits were under review. Both vehicles were gone from the driveway within weeks, and Megan sent me a photo of a repayment letter with one word under it. Why? I didn't answer that one. Later, my mother mailed me a check for $300 with a note that said they were doing what they could. I didn't cash it, but I kept it. Not because it made things right, but because it was the first time anyone in that family had ever sent money in my direction instead of the other way around. In early March, Lauren emailed to say the children were still in the home, the case would stay open for follow-up, and there had been enough improvement that things were moving in the right direction. A few days later, Megan sent me a photo of the 4 kids in front of a small apartment building, each holding a keyring like a trophy. The caption said, "Our own place, tiny but ours, Thank you, even if you hate me." I looked at that picture for a long time before I answered. Then I sent one photo back. Just the view from my living room window at night. City lights cutting through the dark. And I wrote, "No hate, just boundaries." That was all. No dramatic reunion. No promise that everything would be different now. Just a line, finally held in place. What I learned is that some people only call your loyalty love when it benefits them. The minute you stop being the safety net, they act like you betrayed them, when really you just stopped volunteering to be the floor beneath their collapse. Walking away didn't destroy my family. It exposed the parts they had been forcing me to carry alone. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. If you've ever been the responsible one, the fixer, the person everyone assumes will say yes, then you know how hard it is to believe your life still belongs to you. Mine does now. If this story hit home for you, like the video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more stories like this. I'd really love to hear what you think. At what point do you think Claire should have stopped helping? Do you think calling CPS was the right move? Or did she wait too long? And if you were in her place, would you ever let your family back in after that?